The wind was still at the world's end. The darkness of the cave was absolute. A stone body lay by the entrance. A warrior with a face frozen in terror. Then a flash. The bronze shield caught an image that would drive any man mad. Living hair writhed. Fangs showed between purple lips. Medusa slept. A youth advanced through the shadows, invisible. The steel sickle weighed like fate. The sickle fell. The blade found flesh, and from the severed neck, black blood flowed. From the blood emerged two divine beings who did not exist a moment before. Olympus held its breath.
There was a time when the gods walked among men, a time when prophecies dictated the fate of kings and beggars alike. In that time, in the city of Argos, a king named Perseus ruled with a firm hand over a prosperous land. He had riches, he had power, he had armies. But Perseus did not have the one thing he truly desired. He did not have a male heir to inherit his throne. Anguish consumed him night after night. He watched his only daughter, Danae, grow in beauty and grace, but he could not help feeling that his legacy was incomplete. It was then that he made a decision that would forever change the course of his life. He traveled to the Oracle of Delphi, that sacred place where the Pythia pronounced the words of Apollo. The answer came wrapped in sacred smoke. The voice of the Pythia echoed in the stone chamber with a clarity that froze the monarch's blood. You shall never beget a male child, but your daughter will conceive a boy, and that boy, your own grandson, will be the one to take your life. Perseus recoiled, as if the words had been physical blows. During the journey back to Argos, the prophecy repeated in his mind like an endless echo. Your grandson will kill you, your grandson will kill you. But Perseus was not a man willing to accept his fate without a fight. If the oracle had predicted that his grandson would be his murderer, then the solution was simple. He had to ensure that grandson would never come to exist. What came next would demonstrate the cruelty of a father consumed by fear. He ordered the construction of an underground chamber of solid bronze, polished metal walls, a single entrance guarded day and night, not a single crack through which sunlight could enter. Danae was locked in that living tomb. She had food, she had water, but she lacked the only thing that truly mattered: freedom. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Danae gazed at the bronze walls and wondered what crime she had committed to deserve such punishment. But the gods were watching. From the heights of Olympus, Zeus, king of all the immortals, had cast his eyes upon the captive princess. And Zeus decided that no human construction could prevent him from reaching what he desired. One night, while Danae slept, something extraordinary began to happen. Through the tiny cracks in the ceiling, a golden light filtered in. It was not sunlight. It was something divine. The golden rain descended upon Danae like a caress from heaven itself. Zeus had transformed his essence into that precious metal. That night, in the depths of a chamber designed to prevent precisely what was happening, Danae conceived the son of Zeus. The months that followed were filled with uncertainty and terror. Danae hid her pregnancy for as long as she could. The servants noticed the changes in her body, but fear of the king kept them silent. And then the moment came. The day Perseus heard the cry of a newborn coming from the bronze chamber, the world seemed to stop. When he opened the door of the prison, he found his daughter holding a baby with bright eyes and golden hair. Danae tried to explain. She told him about the golden rain. She swore that no mortal man had touched her body, but Perseus was not listening. All he saw Was the prophecy fulfilled? The king wanted to kill the child right then and there, but something stopped him. Fear of the gods. Killing the son of the king of Olympus would bring terrible consequences, so he devised a different plan. He ordered the construction of a wooden chest, large enough to hold 2 people, but small enough for the sea to swallow without effort. Danae and the little Perseus were locked inside. The nails sealed the lid with blows that sounded like death sentences. The chest was thrown into the sea. Acrisius watched from the cliff as the waves swallowed that wooden box. The prophecy had been thwarted, or so he believed. But the king of Argos had underestimated the power of the gods. Poseidon, lord of the oceans, calmed the waters at the request of his brother Zeus. The chest that should have sunk began to float with impossible stability. The currents gently guided it eastward. Days and nights passed as Danae held her son in the darkness, and then the chest touched land. The island of Seriphos emerged as a promise of salvation. A fisherman named Dictys, brother of King Polydectes, was checking his nets that morning when he heard the cries of a baby. When he opened the lid, what he saw left him speechless. A woman of extraordinary beauty was holding a child who seemed to radiate light. Dictys was a man of good heart. He took mother and son to his home and raised them as if they were his own family. Perseus grew with the speed proper to demigods. In a few years, the child who had arrived in a chest had become a young man of extraordinary strength. But the peace would not last forever. Polydectes, the king of Seriphos, was a very different man from his brother. Where Dictys saw in Danae a woman who needed protection, Polydectes saw an object of desire. The princess's beauty obsessed him, and every time he visited his brother's house, his eyes roamed over Danae's body with an eagerness he did not bother to disguise. There was only one obstacle in his way. Perseus, the young demigod, had grown to become his mother's protector. His constant presence prevented Polydectes from getting close to Danae. The king understood that he needed to get rid of the young man, so he devised a plan masterful in its cruelty. He publicly announced that he had decided to court Princess Hippodamia. To win her favor, he needed to gather gifts. He summoned all the inhabitants of the island and asked them to contribute presents. When it was Perseus's turn, the young man found himself in an impossible situation. He had no wealth. He had nothing of value to offer. But his pride prevented him from remaining silent. Then he spoke the words that would seal his fate. He told Polydectes that he had no problem obtaining any gift the king desired, even if that gift were the head of the Gorgon Medusa. The silence that followed was absolute. Medusa was one of the 3 Gorgons, daughters of Phorcys and Ceto. She was the only mortal of the 3 sisters, but that did not make her any less deadly. Her gaze turned any living being who dared to look upon her to stone. Warriors from all lands had tried to hunt her. None had returned. Polydectes could barely contain his joy. He accepted the offer. The young man who bothered him so much had just signed his own death sentence. Perseus left the palace that night with the weight of his promise on his shoulders. His mother wept when she heard. Dictys tried to dissuade him, but the young demigod knew he could not go back on his word. And deep in his heart, a voice whispered that the gods had not saved him from the sea to let him die in a forgotten cave. He was right. That very night, as he walked along the beach, gazing at the stars, 2 figures descended from the sky. Athena, goddess of wisdom, with eyes grey as steel. Hermes, the messenger of the gods, with sandals that seemed to have a life of their own. Athena spoke first. She explained to Perseus that she herself had reasons to desire Medusa's death. The Gorgon had committed an unforgivable offense in one of her temples. Athena had transformed her into the monster she now was, but that had not been enough punishment. She wanted her head. Hermes also had gifts for the young hero, but before delivering the weapons, Perseus had to complete a preliminary task. He had to find the Grey, 3 old women who shared a single eye and a single tooth, and force them to reveal the location of certain nymphs who guarded essential divine objects. The journey to the home of the Grayer was long. Hermes had lent him his winged sandals, which allowed the young man to fly over lands and seas at supernatural speed. Finally, after days of flight, Perseus arrived at the land of the Grayer. It was a desolate place, shrouded in perpetual twilight. The rocks had twisted shapes, and in the center of that nightmarish landscape, 3 hunched figures sat in a circle. Enyo, Pemphredo, and Dano, the Grayi, old women since the very moment of their birth. With a single eye they passed from hand to hand. Perseus watched their ritual from the shadows. When one of the old women extended her hand to receive the eye, the young man lunged forward with the speed of lightning. His hand closed around the eyeball before any of them could react. The chaos that followed was deafening. The 3 old women screamed and cursed, extending their hands in all directions. Perseus offered them a deal. He would return the eye if they revealed the way to the nymphs. Finally, the Grayer yielded. The nymphs dwelt in a hidden garden beyond the north winds. They possessed 3 essential objects, winged sandals of their own, the Kibisis, a magical pouch capable of containing anything, and the helm of Hades, which made whoever wore it completely invisible. The Garden of the Nymphs was the complete opposite of the territory of the Grey. Golden light bathed meadows of flowers. The nymphs received him with smiles and gave him the treasures they guarded. Hermes then appeared with a sickle of steel forged by Hephaestus. The edge was so sharp it could cut the flesh of immortals. Athena delivered her bronze shield with precise instructions. He must never look directly at Medusa. The shield, polished like a mirror, would allow him to see the reflection without suffering the lethal effects. The young hero now had everything he needed. The gods had bet on him. Perseus took flight toward the ends of the world. He flew over oceans no sailor had ever navigated. And finally, as the sun began to disappear into an eternal twilight, he spotted the entrance to the cave. The cave of the Gorgons opened in the side of a cliff like a wound in the earth. Stone statues flanked the entrance, warriors frozen in postures of absolute terror. All those men had come with the same purpose as him. All had failed. But he was not like them. He placed the helm of Hades on his head and vanished from sight. He raised the bronze shield before his face and began to advance, guiding himself only by the reflection. His feet made no sound. The sandals kept him inches above the ground. If this story is capturing your attention, I invite you to subscribe now and turn on notifications. Here, every narrative is a journey through the myths that shaped civilizations. And what comes next in the story of Perseus will shake you to your core. Then he saw them. In the reflection of the shield, 3 figures slept on a bed of bones. Their bodies were a grotesque mixture of woman and monster. Golden wings sprouted from their backs, and their heads were crowned with living creatures that writhed even in sleep. Stheno slept on the left, Euryale on the right, and in the center lay Medusa. Perseus advanced with agonizing slowness. Every inch was a victory against the fear. Medusa's lips were parted, revealing fangs that dripped venom. Her closed eyelids hid those lethal eyes that had turned entire armies to stone. Finally, he found himself beside her. Athena guided his hand. The steel sickle gleamed in the gloom. His eyes never left the reflection in the shield. The sickle descended. The steel cut through flesh and bone. Medusa's head separated from her body with a wet sound. Black blood gushed from the severed neck. And then something extraordinary happened. From the mutilated neck emerged 2 fully formed beings. The first had resplendent wings, white fur, and eyes of intense blue. It was Pegasus, the winged creature born from the blood of a monster. The second was a giant holding a sword of gold, Chrysaor. The children of Poseidon and Medusa, conceived during that violation in Athena's temple, had waited inside their mother's body until the moment of her death, but Perseus had no time to contemplate the miracle. Stheno and Euryale had awakened. The screams of the immortal Gorgons filled the cave. Their eyes opened, searching for the killer. But the helm of Hades kept Perseus invisible. The two creatures lunged toward where they thought the attacker was, but found only empty air. The demigod was already running. With Medusa's head stored in the kibyssus, he flew toward the exit. The sandals propelled him at superhuman speed. The Gorgons shrieked with fury, trying to find the invisible assassin. The pursuit lasted hours, but Perseus always stayed one step ahead. Finally, as the sun began to rise, the Gorgons abandoned the search. He had achieved the impossible. During the return flight as he crossed Libya, drops of blood fell from the kibyssus. Where that black blood touched the sand, venomous creatures emerged instantly. The journey continued westward, toward the lands of the Titan Atlas. Perseus descended seeking hospitality. But Atlas had been warned by a prophecy that a son of Zeus would come to steal the golden apples of the Hesperides. He did not listen to the young man's explanations. Atlas attacked. His fists descended toward Perseus with force enough to crush mountains. But the demigod was faster. His hand reached for the kibyssus. He drew out Medusa's head. The eyes of the Gorgon glowed with greenish light. Atlas had barely an instant to understand before his body began to transform. Flesh turned to rock. Where once there had been a Titan, now rose a mountain range. The Atlas Mountains were born. Perseus stored the head and continued his journey. Fate led him to the coasts of Ethiopia. From the heights, he spotted a figure chained to the rocks. A young woman of extraordinary beauty sobbed as the waves threatened to swallow her. The demigod descended to investigate. Andromeda, for that was her name, told him her story. Her mother Cassiopeia had proclaimed that her own beauty surpassed that of the Nereids. Poseidon had punished such arrogance by sending a sea monster to devastate the coasts. The oracle had revealed the only way to appease the god's wrath. Andromeda had to be sacrificed to the monster. Perseus felt a fury he could barely contain. He flew to the royal palace and presented himself before the king and queen. With a proposal, he would kill the monster. He would free Andromeda, but in return, he demanded her hand in marriage. Cepheus accepted without hesitation. Perseus returned to the rocks where Andromeda awaited her fate. The sea was beginning to stir unnaturally. Something was moving in the depths. The sea monster was emerging. What rose from the waters defied any description. A creature of iridescent scales, with jaws large enough to swallow an entire ship. But Perseus felt no fear. The battle that followed was a spectacle the fishermen would remember for generations. The hero flew around the creature, dodging its bites by inches, seeking vulnerable spots. The sickle cut the flesh where it could. The monster roared with fury and pain. Finally, when the creature opened its jaws for one last attempt to catch him, Perseus flew directly into its mouth. Seconds later, the bloodied tip of the sickle emerged from the monster's head. Perseus had pierced the beast from the inside. It collapsed into the waters. Andromeda was freed from her chains. The wedding was celebrated in Cepheus's palace with all the pomp the occasion deserved, but the peace would not last. Phineus, brother of Cepheus and Andromeda's original betrothed, burst into the celebration with an army of followers. He claimed the princess as his by right. His men drew their weapons. The battle began. Perseus fought with the fury of one who defends what he loves. But Phineus's men were too many. For every one he killed, two more took his place. The demigod began to feel the weight of exhaustion. Then he made a decision. He shouted a warning to Andromeda and those who supported him. He ordered them to close their eyes. When he was sure they had obeyed, he drew Medusa's head from the abysses. Phineus's men, with their eyes wide open, beheld the eyes of the Gorgon. One by one, their bodies turned to stone. Phineus himself was the last to petrify. Perseus and Andromeda remained in Ethiopia for a time, but duty called to the demigod. He had to return to Seriphos and deliver Medusa's head to Polydectes. What he found when he arrived confirmed his worst fears. During his absence, Polydectes had redoubled his attempts to possess Danae. His mother and Dictys had fled, taking refuge in a sacred temple. Perseus felt fury rise within him like an unstoppable tide. He flew directly to the royal palace where Polydectes was holding a banquet. When the doors flew open and Perseus entered, walking with steps that echoed like thunder, silence fell over the feast. Polydectes asked him if he had brought the promised gift. His voice trembled slightly. Perseus did not answer with words. His hand went to the kibyssus. He drew out Medusa's head. Polydectes had time to scream once before his body began to transform. The process spread like a wave through the hall. Every courtier, every guard who had looked was turned to stone. The king of Seriphos joined the collection of statues. Perseus found his mother and Dictys in the temple and freed them. He named Dictys as the new king of Seriphos. He returned the winged sandals and the kibyssus to Hermes, and Medusa's head was given to Athena, who placed it at the center of her aegis. But the story of Perseus had not ended. An ancient prophecy still awaited its fulfillment. The demigod decided to return to Argos. He wanted to meet the grandfather who had marked his life since before his birth, but Acrisius received news that his grandson was approaching. The old king, tormented for decades by fear, fled from Argos. He headed for Larissa, where King Teutamides was holding funeral games in honor of his father. Perseus, not finding his grandfather in Argos, set out in search of him. Rumors led him to Larissa. The demigod decided to participate in the competitions. The discus throw particularly appealed to him. Perseus took the bronze discus in his hands. The stadium was full of spectators. Among them, unknown to Perseus, was Acrisius, hidden under a hood. Perseus made his throw. The discus flew through the air with the strength of a demigod. But something went wrong. A gust of wind deflected its trajectory. The discus veered toward the stands. The crowd screamed and parted, all except one. Acrisius did not have time to dodge the projectile. The discus struck him on the head with lethal force. The king of Argos fell onto the stones of the stadium, dead before he touched the ground. The prophecy had been fulfilled. Perseus ran to the fallen body. When he pulled back the hood and saw his grandfather's face, horror paralyzed him. The man who had tried to kill him lay dead by his hand. But it had not been murder. It had been an accident, the inevitable fulfillment of a fate that not even the gods could alter. Perseus wept over the body of Acrisius. He organized a funeral worthy of a king, and then he made a decision that defined his character. He refused to claim the throne of Argos. The idea of ruling his grandfather's land was unbearable to him. He exchanged kingdoms with Megapenthes, who ruled Tiryns, and finally, free from the shadows of the past, Perseus began to build something new. He fortified Tiryns, he established just laws, and he founded a new city, Mycenae. Mycenae grew under the reign of Perseus and Andromeda. The Cyclopean walls defied any description. They had many children: Perses, Alcaeus, Sthenelus, Helios, Mestor, Electryon. A dynasty that would extend through generations. And from that line of divine blood, Heracles would eventually be born. The greatest of all Greek heroes descended directly from Perseus and Andromeda. The blood of Zeus would flow to the last and most powerful of heroes. Perseus gave Medusa's head to Athena, who placed it at the center of her aegis forever. He returned the winged sandals, the helm of invisibility, the sacred kibyssus. He founded Mycenae, a city that would dominate the known world for generations. His children perpetuated his lineage until the blood of Zeus flowed to Heracles. Because some victories do not end with the last enemy defeated. Some victories plant seeds that bloom for millennia. And when we look at the night sky and find the constellation that bears his name, we must remember that fate can be defied, but never ignored. Perseus killed the grandfather who tried to murder him. Not with hatred, not with vengeance, with a discus thrown into the air at athletic games, because that is how prophecies work. They are fulfilled even when we try to avoid them. They are fulfilled precisely because we try to avoid them. The gods catastrophized Perseus after his death, placing him among the stars so that his memory would endure forever. Beside him shines Andromeda, his wife. Every August, when shooting stars cross the sky in what we call the Perseids, we are seeing the final echoes of that hero who defied the impossible. This was the story of Perseus, the son of Zeus and Danae, the grandson of Acrisius, the husband of Andromeda, the founder of Mycenae, the man who looked at death through a mirror and cut off its head. His legacy was to demonstrate that even when fate seems sealed, a man with enough courage can forge his own path. Acrisius fled from the prophecy his entire life and died exactly as predicted. Perseus faced every challenge without retreating and became a legend. That is the difference between ordinary men and heroes. If this story touched your heart, write in the comments. Fate is fulfilled, but I choose how to face it.